I used to have a part-time job as a security guard at a senior home. Not assisted living, so there weren't any nurses or such on the premises. Just me and 50 to 100 old people. My shift was weekends, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., though nothing really happened until 10 p.m. when all the visitors left and the residents were asleep. I walked around checking windows and doors, making sure they were locked. The cafeteria had a door to the back garden. I made sure to lock that too. After finishing my rounds, it's 4 stories high, I get back to my desk and I see movement in the garden. It's windy, so I assumed it was just the trees and bushes blowing around, but I keep a close eye on it. That's when I see the shape of a person in a white dress dancing in the garden. I race to the cafeteria and see nothing. After checking the door, it's still locked, so I go back to my desk and watch the feed. She comes back, whirling around, and it makes me feel cold. I grab my phone and go check one more time, still nothing. But this time the door is unlocked. I relock it, head back to my desk, and look through the cameras. Nobody's in the building, but I walk around just in case. After confirming nobody is inside, I sit back down and calm down, assuming I've mistakenly unlocked the door. Then I see a shadowy figure standing in front of the main entrance doors. I look to the front cameras. Nothing there. I look back at the door, and the shadow is standing right there. That's when things got really weird. The shadow smiled, disappeared, and then the doors opened. To open those doors, you need a security card, or a resident opens it from the inside. Nobody was there to buzz them in, my desk is in front of the doors, and nobody was outside to use the card, but the door was wide open. I brace myself to deal with whatever is trying to enter through the second set of doors. Those are just motion sensor, but nothing comes. The outside doors close, and the inside doors remain shut. After the doors shut, I saw a flash of light in the garden camera, and then nothing. I decide to call maintenance and tell them about the faulty door, and walk outside to investigate, going around the whole building just in case I find a kid messing with me. That's when I see the giant steel double doors where the dumpsters are stored, and they're bent outward. A vehicle hitting the doors would push them inward, but the doors looked like they were rammed from the inside. When I mentioned that to maintenance, they were shocked. The doors were fine when my shift started, and I didn't hear any noise. I quit a week later. Some context. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and earlier this past year I decided to create a Grindr profile, because why the hell not? I'm single, and I may as well be a dumb college student while I'm a dumb college student. My friends and I were studying late one night in their dorm room like always. All of my close friends lived together in the dorm, so their lounge was the primary hangout spot. It was a little after midnight, and I went on Grindr. At this point, I had been on the app for about 2 months, and had gone on a fair amount of dates by this point. When I opened the app, I received a message from a guy. I don't remember his name, so I'll just continue to refer to him as the guy. I clicked on his profile, and it was a pretty cute guy. He had a shirtless picture, which was common, and he was attractive enough for me to get more information on him. His caption read, "In town for work." I read his bio, and he explained that he was in town for work, and that he was staying at a nearby hotel, and was able to host visitors there. I replied to his message and began the typical Grindr talk. How are you? What are you into? Can you host? Etc. After talking for about a half hour or so and exchanging pictures, we agreed to meet. I must say that I didn't get any indication that this guy was a catfish, or I was talking to someone who wasn't who they said they were. It's usually pretty obvious when someone isn't who they say they are. That's what I told myself, at least. Whenever I decide to meet up with a guy, I always tell one of my friends and then share my location with them. I do this, and then I head out. The hotel was about 10 minutes from my university. As I was driving there, the guy messaged me and asked, "Hey, so my business partner might come back soon. Would it be cool if we did stuff in your car?" Not an unusual request to engage in car play, but I did start to become a bit suspicious. Why would his business partner be out this late? Yet again, here I was out this late, so I brushed it off and continued to make my way to the hotel. I arrived at the hotel, and I would say it was about 1 a.m. at this point. I looked at my phone again, and I had received another message from the guy. He said, "Pull around to the back of the hotel." I drove into the parking lot and made my way to the back of the hotel past the pool. This is when things started to get weird. As I pulled into the back of the hotel parking lot, I noticed a guy in a red hoodie in between some cars. Assuming it was the guy I had been messaging, I pulled into one of the spots underneath a light post about 20 feet in front of the dumpster that sat in the corner of the parking lot. By this point, the guy in the red hoodie had gone out of sight. I instinctively clicked on the button to lock my doors. I checked the app and received another message from the guy that said, "Pull back next to the dumpster." I assumed that since I was underneath the light, he was worried we'd be caught if a guest or hotel staff saw us. At this point, I started to get a bit sketched out, but I figured that maybe my anxiety was just getting the best of me. I put my car into reverse and pulled back next to the dumpster and put my car in park. At this point, I'm scanning the parking lot for the guy. I don't see anyone, no sight of the guy in the red hoodie either. I feel my heart rate suddenly increase, and I begin getting cold sweats. Maybe I shouldn't have driven out here, I remember thinking to myself. Then I checked the app again, and I received another message from the guy. "Turn your car off and get into the back seat." Okay, it was at that point that my fight-or-flight response kicked in, because I, without thinking, immediately turned my car on and hauled ass out of there. I sped out of the parking lot as fast as my poor '04 car could go. I didn't even stop to look for incoming traffic when I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road. I drove about 2 miles down the road, away from the hotel, and pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. At this point, I'm trembling, but I'm thinking maybe I just overreacted. I checked the app again to see if the guy messaged me anything. I was expecting a "what the fuck?" and the messages from the guy were gone. I'm assuming he blocked me, which leads me to believe that whatever he had planned was not good at all. Was he trying to jump me, steal my car, or maybe something worse? Needless to say, I deleted the app after this incident. To everyone who uses any sort of dating app, be careful who you meet, where you meet, and just take precautions. Our parents told us never to talk to strangers for a reason. So a few years ago, I lived in one of the most beautiful yet crime-ridden cities in America. At this time, I lived upstairs in a building with 4 apartments. The building layout is relevant, so I'll explain. It's a square building with 2 apartments upstairs and 2 downstairs. In the front of the house were 3 doors. 2 led to the downstairs apartments, and the middle door opened to a stairway. At the top of the stairway was a landing where my and my neighbor's doors were located. The upstairs tenants rarely used the front door, unless to get the mail, because our parking was in an alley behind the house, and we had our own individual entrances there. I should also note that the door at the bottom of the front stairs was always locked, even though we had solid front doors that led directly into our apartments. If you didn't know the building, you might assume the middle door led straight into an apartment and not a staircase. Anyway, so this all happened when I, a 30-year-old female, was about 24 and living on my own with my 2 large but super friendly pit bulls. The other 3 apartments were all occupied with people who went to the nearby art college. This happened in the first week of the school break, so everyone had gone home to visit their families and whatnot. Anyway, it was about 2 a.m. and I had just gotten into bed when my dog started getting antsy and running from my bedroom to the front door. I wasn't expecting company, so I decided to look out my peephole. No one was there, and the motion sensor light that goes off when someone gets to the top of the stairs hadn't come on. I calmed the dogs, though they wouldn't take their attention off the door, and went back to bed. A minute later, my dogs were up and whining at the door again. What the fuck? I'm so tired and want to sleep. I decide to investigate, thinking maybe a mouse or rat had somehow gotten into the front hallway, and the dogs can smell it or something. So I unlock and open my front door. At the bottom of the stairs, and making his way up towards me, was a police officer with his head down and trying to silently creep up the stairs. Through the crack in my door, I yell, "What the fuck is going on? Why are you in my building?" Meanwhile, my dogs start barking behind me, probably because they could tell how nervous and startled I was. He stops creeping and looks up the stairs towards me. I'm not sure he could see me because my lights were off and the motion light hadn't come on yet. This guy looks so startled and so surprised, like a kid caught red-handed stealing a cookie from the cookie jar. It takes him a few seconds to answer me, and he says something along the lines of, I noticed a backyard fire at the address it was creating too much smoke. So I say, there's no one having a bonfire here. And if there was, why did you decide to come into my house instead of ringing the doorbell? I'm pissed and scared. Do you see any smoke around my house? Why didn't you just drive around the alley down the back of the house to check the backyard? By the time I finished the questions, he had backed down the few steps he'd made it up and was shutting the door while saying, sorry. His behavior was so weird and not at all like the pompous, confident way most police officers in my area behave when they think they've got to flex their badge. I wait a minute by my door to make sure he's not coming back in, grab my dogs, and take them to lock the bottom door, and make sure my apartment door is thoroughly deadbolted, chained, and the knob is locked. I went to my back patio and looked down on where we have a fire pit, tiki torches, grill, etc., and none of them had been used for weeks. Not only that, but there was no smoke anywhere. None of the people on my block that night had any kind of grill started or backyard fires. There wasn't even the smell of smoke, let alone smoke thick enough to warrant the cops coming by. I have no idea what that cop was talking about. Unfortunately, it was too dark to see what he really looked like, aside from tall and white, or get a badge number. And by the time I finished inspecting my backyard for smoke and went to see if I could get the license plate off his cruiser, he was gone. The next day I checked to see if the lock on my front door was broken, because how was he able to get in if the door is always locked? I make sure every time I get the mail, because I have diagnosed OCD. There were scratches all over the lock, as if someone had been picking at it. It was a fairly new lock, so the scratches had to have been recent. I called the local precinct and asked if they had a call at my address. They confirmed what I thought. They didn't send anyone out here last night. I ended up asking them to send someone out to take a report. None of the officers who showed up matched what little I saw of the guy from the night before. Of course, no prints were found, and nothing ever came of it. Until this day, I'm terrified to call the police to my house in case he shows back up. I shudder to think what the guy's real motivations were and what could have happened if I didn't have my wonderful dogs there to protect me. So, Officer McCreepy, let's not meet. So this happened about 5 years ago when I was 9 months pregnant. I was Christmas shopping at the mall with my then 7 and 15-year-old daughters one Saturday night in a very safe city with very low crime rate. There was an Applebee's connected to the mall, and we ended our shopping pretty late. The mall stores were starting to close, so I took my kids to the connected Applebee's for a late dinner. We finish eating about 10 p.m. and leave out the Applebee's entrance into the practically deserted parking lot with shopping bags in tow. As we got to the car, I was in the middle of maneuvering the shopping bags on my arms to find my keys when a crusty-looking guy in his 50s started walking up from somewhere in the parking lot. He sported shaggy gray and white hair and a faded flannel shirt and old jeans. I noticed him briskly approaching me, and when he was about 40 feet away, he said, "This is a stick-up. Give me all your money." My blood ran cold, and I stared at him owlishly, shakingly saying, "What?" He then said he was just kidding, and came up and stood right next to my daughters, who were standing on the other side of the car, waiting for me to unlock the car to let them in. He then starts making small talk with me and my girls. He's asking things like, were they being good girls for Santa, how old they were, if we got all our Christmas shopping done, what kind of things did we get, etc. He didn't seem drunk, high, slow, or mentally challenged at all. He was very coherent and seemed sound of mind. Mind you, I was a heavily pregnant woman alone with my 2 daughters in a mostly deserted parking lot at 10 o'clock at night, who was being approached by a stranger who came and stood right next to my kids on the other side of the car just shooting the breeze, talking to me and my kids with his hands in his pockets and occasionally looking over his shoulder. I didn't want to aggravate him, so I was politely conversing with him and trying to look calm and nonchalant while trying to disguise my frantic hands digging inside my giant purse for my car keys. This exchange went on for a couple of minutes while he periodically kept looking over his shoulder. I was silently panicking and trying to politely keep the situation from escalating by calmly and nonchalantly talking to him, while also trying in vain to find my damn car keys to get us out of there. They were hiding in there good. I felt that at any moment he was going to pull a knife or gun or rob me, and my kids were right next to him, away from their mother on the other side of the car, and I couldn't find my fucking car keys to get my kids into the car safely. He kept trying to engage them in conversation, and I could see that my oldest daughter was a little weirded out. She kept glancing at me to gauge my assessment and reaction of the situation. Kids often tend not to recognize potential danger when they're with their parents, since they see us as their protectors. And being that he was only talking and acting friendly, and I was doing my best to stay calm, they were oblivious to the alarming situation we were all in. And being 9 months pregnant, and that I was no match for this full-grown man, especially if he was hiding a weapon on him. While still desperately digging for my keys, I tried to politely give him hints that the conversation was over by saying things like, "It was nice chatting with you, but I gotta get these kids to bed," and "It was nice meeting you," and telling my girls to say that it was nice meeting him too. My polite attempts to get this guy to leave weren't working because he kept sidestepping my attempts and asking him what their favorite school subjects are and how nice young ladies they were, while I was struggling to get my shopping bags and digging in my giant cluttered purse for my car keys. My outgoing 7-year-old was completely oblivious to how not okay the situation was because he was being friendly and because the whole "I'm with mommy, I'm safe" child mentality. So she started to talk about what she picked out for Daddy for Christmas and started enthusiastically talking about kid stuff and asking him if he knew what Minecraft was, keeping the creep from leaving us alone by keeping him engaged in conversation. They didn't realize that I was becoming desperate to get them the hell out of there. Then I suddenly felt this sinking feeling of dread when I realized that I may have lost my car keys in the mall, and that we were stuck outside with this strange man who kept looking over his shoulder and was showing no signs of walking away. I started to feel my adrenaline start to spike, and my heart and stomach started doing flip-flops. I felt like at any moment shit was going to go down, as the gravity of realizing there was no other people or witnesses around, and that we were totally alone with him, and at that moment the odds were stacked against us, and he had his chance. Then he all of a sudden was like, "Okay, it was nice talking with you. See you later," and walked off in the same direction which he came. It wasn't until then that I found my car keys and unlocked the car. I told my kids to get in fast, and I got in too, locking the doors and starting the car to drive the hell out of there. My 15-year-old lightheartedly and jokingly said, "Okay, that was weird," and laughed. I was overwhelmed with relief, and then I was confused about what just happened. I thought to myself, why the hell would a guy of seemingly sound mind think it totally acceptable to go out of his way to just approach a woman and her kids in a deserted parking lot at night just to chit-chat? But being that nothing bad happened, I brushed it off and joked about it too. When we got home, my husband greeted us and asked us how shopping went. I said it went well, and my 15-year-old told him what happened in the parking lot and how weird it was, kind of joking about it. I started joking too, saying how I was mentally having a panic attack while trying to look calm. I started making fun of myself by telling my husband how I was attempting to inconspicuously rummage through my purse to find my car keys. My husband went completely white, and I acknowledged his horrified look of alarm, assuring him that, albeit creepy, the guy was just talking, and eventually left on his own. Now my father-in-law is a retired sheriff's deputy, and my husband went through the police academy training after graduating high school. He decided to go to business instead of becoming a cop. And being that knowledge he gained from that, plus growing up with a cop for a dad, I found out why my husband looked absolutely horrified when I told him the details. My husband told me that he was 100% sure that the reason the guy was hanging around us and chit-chatting was because he was waiting for me to unlock my car. The reason he was standing next to our kids was because once I unlocked the car and the kids started to get inside, he was most likely going to force himself into the car with the kids and hold a knife or gun to them to gain leverage on me to force me to cooperate, knowing that I wouldn't abandon my kids. This would force me to get into the car with them and do whatever he wanted me to do, which most likely would be to drive to a remote location to do God knows what. And being that he wasn't wearing a mask suggests that his intentions were also to leave no witnesses to identify him. I then remembered that he was positioned by the backseat passenger door where my 7-year-old was standing by, waiting to get in. My husband then told me that the most likely reason why the guy ended up leaving was because it took so long for me to find my keys, and the longer it took, the more anxious and spooked it made him. And that whole time I was desperate to find my car keys, which through some sort of divine intervention stayed hidden in my purse, thus saving us from being potentially abducted.